some video rolling here. I've got this guy's conversation going on here. This is all good. So, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us what company you're with?
My name is Galanakis. I'm a senior tools programmer at Bioware Austin, working on Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Okay. When did you first realize that you were morphing into a technical artist from your original role, and what was that original role?
In college, I realized I didn't want to do 3D animation, and then I also realized I don't really want to do 3D modeling. And I got a job as a character artist at a startup studio in Seattle, Redmond, and within week one I made my first script, and that was really the last piece of, I made two pieces. I made a shield and a sword, and then a script, and that was really the only two pieces of content I've ever made professionally. So I've been a technical artist from the start.
Wow. So can you provide an example from a project you worked on that required your specific skills as a technical artist, and sort of like how it improved the process?
Geez.
There's probably a lot of them.
Yeah. So let's start early and talk about less technical things, I guess. So I came to Bioware knowing a pretty good deal of MaxScript, and what I was able to do was jump into Puppet Shop, which is the rigging software we use, and build something like an entirely new bone system using Puppet Shop. So this is sort of like complex. I built in, so Puppet Shop legs work one way, and I was able to build a leg that worked an entirely different way. So that sort of Max scripting ability allowed me to make pretty sophisticated rigging systems, but inside of a very complex rigging system, which can often be harder than doing something from scratch. So
that just sounds really cool.
It is hard, and I wish I never did it.
So you kind of came from the art side of the house, or from the programming side, or were you always kind of straddling the line?
In college, I was in college for architecture, and I worked on mod for Rome Till the War. And in my fourth semester, first week, it was about 6 weeks into working on this mod, I'm like, you know what, I want to do this as a career. I didn't know you could make game art as a career. So, but I was always very technical. I was always enjoyed science and math to some extent. So then I found out, like, hey, I can write shaders in college. And then I found out, like, hey, I can just write scripts, and I can code and do some sort of artsy stuff. And then I just have, in the past few years, moved completely over to the coding side. So I'm working in managed languages and whatnot. So it's been a progression from complete art to complete technical.
Okay. So how much and what kinds of self-directed learning enabled that transition?
You'll find this, it's common in studios that all of it's self-directed. When I started out, I didn't have a tech artist to teach me anything, so I had to learn everything from a lot of the resources that I found online. And all those resources were really important, which is why I started a website called techartist.org to sort of, I realized a lot of people were having the same struggle I was with. They were having to do self-directed learning. It was like, well, I wish that learning was a little more directed. So I created those resources so people could figure out the knowledge that they need, because tech art is a really small discipline. There are probably only a few hundred of us, and there are only a handful at any given studio. Even on some of the largest tech art teams are only a dozen people or so. So it's fundamental to be a self-directed learner and figure out things on your own, but also be part of the community, so you have places to go and you can get advice on things, both technical and sort of organizational advice.
Wow. So what kinds of mathematics do you use regularly, sort of on the day-to-day kinds of work that you're doing?
When I was writing shaders, I was doing more math. Then I was doing less shaders, but I moved more into the 3D animation stuff. So I've written pretty complex rigging software and animation, motion retargeting systems, and those things involve pretty heavy 3D math. This is true matrix transformation and really understanding what goes on when you do these math things. And outside of animation and rendering, though, just pure tools programming, you tend not to have too much math, so I'm back in no math land, I guess.
Okay. What languages were you doing the transformations in? Was that C++? Was that Python?
So I would work as much as possible in C# and manage code, and then I would work in MaxScript as well. So between managed code and MacScript. And at various points, when I started Bioware, I was using more Python, so we had Python math libraries and stuff, and I was doing transformations and whatnot. So but it doesn't really matter. The concepts, especially with math, are really the same when you're talking about 3D math. So.
Okay. Were there any really esoteric, like kind of out there levels of mathematics that you had to deal with on like one or two problems? Or?
Yes, writing these motion retargeting systems made every other 3D math I've ever worked on simple, especially when you're talking about getting information into or out of a 3D program that's really obtuse. So there were some really complex things, like it's easy to get a parent space or world space transform when you know the tricks, but it's really hard to figure out how to like transform those across spaces of various objects of hierarchies that may be unknown at certain points. And nothing incredible, but IKFK switches to make sure swivels go into the right place and things like this. And working with existing systems, so it's not like I can write it from scratch. There have been a number of very interesting examples of how to use 3D math. But if I knew less 3D math, I probably would have asked a client programmer or a graphics programmer for help. But I knew enough to shoot myself, to hang myself. And I eventually got it done. It took a while. It's always frustrating. So.
Wow! First you shot yourself, then you hung yourself. That must have been some project.
And then I figured it out, so it was all right.
That's really cool. So what are like the low-level technical concepts that you really had to grok in order to be a technical artist? And I know they're always changing. So it's like, have there been several over your career so far?
The thing is, they're not changing.
Okay.
You need to be a programmer. There's a ton of literature on how to write tools and how to write code. Now, technical artists have not been around for a long time, so we don't have books for technical artists, but we have a lot of books for programming, a lot of books for applications development, and those are the low-level, so to speak, concepts. They're not that low-level, but those, for technical artists, I guess they are. Those are those low-level concepts that a tech artist needs to learn. You need to understand software design patterns and how to write object-oriented software and what functional programming means and how to use managed languages and what dynamic and strongly typed means and how to work in compiled languages. You need to be a competent programmer, and so there's tons of literature for how to do this, and it's really not that low level. There's no excuse. You need to understand how to program in order to write tools and systems effectively.
It's just interesting because Brenda Brathwaite just gave the game education rant that designers need to know how to code too. So I'm hearing that from multiple sources now.
Yeah,
so maybe everyone should be coding at some level. I mean, you have to understand it because it has to go through that at some point.
Right.
Okay.
It gives you context, if nothing else. It's like living in another country. I talked about it a little bit at the boot camp, where I was talking about tech art, switching over to engineering, and engineering switching over to tech art, and sharing people. Teaching designers how to code gives them an understanding of how the systems work that they rely on. It's like understanding what rendering is for a visual artist, how specular maps and normal maps work. Designers, in the same way, need to understand how the logic, what computer logic is. They need to understand booleans and switch statements and string comparisons and how enums work and all sort of high-level programming things, basic programming things, but they need to understand it because there's tons of context and tons of understanding about how the systems they're using work.
Were there other artistic principles that you also had to kind of come up to speed on over the course of your career so far?
No, I've gotten more and more away from the graphics portion of tech art, so I tend to rely on the artists to define what good art is and what isn't. There's some tech artists who are developing more shaders, who need to understand more visual principles, but I leave that stuff to the experts at this point.
Okay.
They don't tell me how to write systems, and I don't tell them what good art looks like.
Fair enough. We may have already covered this one, and if so, just let me know. If there's one thing you could tell academics about the role of a technical artist, what would it be?
I'm going to try to say something unique, Not sure what it is. I'm sure someone will say they have to be good learners, and they have to be self-starters, and they have to be inquisitive and craving knowledge. They also have to be ruthless. Working with the so close to content developers who want to be iterative and free and loose and change things and sort of do whatever they want to develop their content, you sometimes, if you go along with that too much, you're not going to develop tools and systems effectively, and you're not going to provide leadership for your content teams on creating effective workflows. Sometimes being ruthless like this means telling people they can't get what they want, or giving them something that is not exactly what they want, but is better for the greater scheme of things. So you may need to hand them small bruises so you can achieve something bigger in the end. You need to sort of trust in your dream, and you need to sometimes be ruthless in achieving your vision, as long as that vision is, improving everyone's workflow at the studio. So,
remarkable insight there, and definitely one that no one has mentioned yet. Is there anything else you would want to tell me, game educators, anything, or hopefully this is just the start of the conversation? But
everyone's so concerned with how do we get tech artists coming out of college, and I'm so glad people are concerned with that, but really what I'm concerned with is how do I convince studios that we need to hire those tech artists that are coming out of college? Because we still haven't come to realize there's an incredible value in junior TAs. I think I worry that people are going to come out as tech artists, and basically 5 studios in the United States will have enough tech artists to absorb these really junior guys, because everyone's looking for seniors and they're promoting their artists and stuff. There's nothing I want more than someone who's coming out of college as a tech artist. What I need is to convince management that no, I don't want a senior guy. I want someone who really wants to be a tech artist, who hasn't fallen into this role, but who's really earned this role, and they know that's what they want to do. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rob. That was
my pleasure.
A fantastic interview.